There are approximately 90 million pet cats in the United States, and for decades, around 20% of them, roughly 18 million cats, have had a procedure done to them that most of their owners described as a quick surgery, a minor inconvenience. Something you do so the couch doesn't get scratched. Something you ask the vet about at the same appointment where you discuss food brands and flea prevention. Declawing, it sounds like trimming a nail. It is not trimming a nail. What actually happens during a cat declawing procedure is this. A veterinarian amputates the last bone of each of the cat's toes, not the claw itself, the bone the claw grows from. The equivalent, in human anatomy, of removing every finger at the last knuckle, all 10 of them, in one surgery on an animal that'll walk on those amputated stubs for the rest of its life. For decades, this was legal everywhere in the United States. Routine, widely practiced, defended by parts of the veterinary profession as a reasonable option for owners who otherwise might surrender their cats. Paid for by millions of Americans who genuinely believed they were doing something minor. On October 9, 2025, California Governor Gavin Newsom signed Assembly Bill 867 into law, effective January 1, 2026. Cat declawing is illegal in California, unless a veterinarian determines it is medically necessary for the cat's own health. California became the 7th state in the United States to ban the procedure. Veterinarians who perform it face fines, license suspension, or permanent revocation of their license. And the people who fought the hardest for 7 years, through 5 failed attempts, spending over $1 million in lobbying to keep it legal. Where to bets? This is that story. And it is one of the most revealing battles over animal welfare, professional power, and what we actually owe the animals who live in our homes that has ever been fought in an American legislature. To understand why this fight happened the way it did, why it took 7 years, 5 failed bills, and more than $1 million in industry lobbying before California finally passed. A ban that most of the public supported from the very beginning, you need to understand what cat declawing actually is. Not what the industry called it, what it actually is. The medical term is onechectomy. In its most common form, the procedure involves the surgical removal of the distal phalanx, the less bony of each toe on a cat's front paws. Most vets perform it on all 10 front toes simultaneously. The cat is placed under general anesthesia. A scalpel or surgical blade cuts through the joint between the second and third toe bones, severing the ligaments, tendons, and blood vessels that connect them. The bone is removed. The wound is closed with sutures or surgical glue. The paws are bandaged. The cat wakes up and is sent home, in most cases within 24 hours, to walk on 10 freshly amputated toe ends. Studies have linked the surgery to complications, including infection, pain, hemorrhage, and anesthetic complications. Onechectomy is also associated with an increased likelihood of behavioral changes such as biting, aggression, and litter box avoidance. Research has also found that declawed cats are more prone to developing back pain and having residual bone fragments. That last point, residual bone fragments, deserves a moment of attention. In some declawing procedures, small fragments of bone are left behind in the toe. They do not dissolve. They do not disappear. They sit inside the paw, embedded in the soft tissue for the rest of the cat's life, causing pain with every step. The cat cannot tell you. It just starts avoiding the litter box because the texture of the litter hurts its amputated paws. It starts biting instead of scratching because scratching is no longer possible and biting is the only defense it has left. Its gait changes because the natural walking posture of a cat, weight distributed across the toe pads, is no longer possible when the toe ends are amputated stumps. Its spine compensates. Its back hurts. And its owner, in many cases, never connects any of this to the surgery they paid for 2 years ago. They just think their cat has a personality problem. This is what 18 million American cats had done to them, because it was convenient. Because no one used the word amputation. Because the industry that performed it had a financial interest in calling it routine. The first crack in the wall appeared not in a state legislature but in a small city in California, West Hollywood, a city of 35,000 people, famously progressive, famously protective of its large pet-owning population, became the first city in the United States to ban cat declawing. The ban passed. The veterinary lobby challenged it in court, arguing that cities did not have the authority to regulate veterinary practice. The challenge failed. The ban stood. 7 other California cities followed. Then in 2019, New York became the first state in the country to pass a statewide ban. Maryland, Washington, D.C., and Massachusetts also passed bans. Globally, dozens of countries, including Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, and Switzerland, had already banned cat declawing. By 2025, the United States was becoming the outlier. In most of the developed world, declawing a cat for cosmetic or convenience reasons was already illegal. In Europe, it had been banned for years. In Australia and New Zealand, banned. In the UK, banned. The international veterinary consensus had shifted decisively. The procedure was cruel, it was unnecessary, and there were non-surgical alternatives that worked. In California, the largest state in the country, with the largest cat population, 5 separate attempts to pass a statewide ban had died in the legislature between 2018 and 2024. Not because lawmakers voted against them. The bills died because lawmakers chose not to take them up at subsequent hearings. An informal process of legislative burial that left almost no public record of who killed them or why. Behind the scenes, one organization had spent more than $1 million making sure they died. The California Veterinary Medical Association. The CVMA's position was stated clearly and consistently throughout the 7-year campaign against the ban. Veterinarians, they argued, are medical professionals. Medical professionals make decisions based on the individual circumstances of individual patients, a law that prohibits a surgical procedure, regardless of the clinical circumstances, removes professional discretion from the people most qualified to exercise it. If a veterinarian determines that declawing is the best option for a specific cat in a specific situation, the government has no business overriding that judgment. The CVMA argued that veterinarians should be allowed to exercise professional judgment as to whether to perform a surgical procedure on a case-by-case basis. The AVMA echoed the importance of professional discretion. This is not an argument without logic. Medical professionals do make individualized decisions. Surgical procedures that are wrong for most patients can be right for specific patients in specific circumstances. The principle of clinical autonomy. The idea that a trained professional's judgment should not be overridden by legislation is a real and important principle in medical ethics. But here's the problem with that argument, as applied to cat declawing. The procedure has no medical benefit to the cat. None. Declawing does not treat any feline medical condition. It does not improve any aspect of the cat's health. It does not extend its life. It does not reduce its pain. It is performed entirely for the benefit of the owner, to protect furniture, to reduce the risk of scratches, to make the cat easier to live with. Around 20% of cats in the United States have been subjected to this procedure. When a veterinarian performs elective declawing, they are not exercising clinical judgment in the interest of their patient. They are performing elective amputation surgery on a healthy animal, causing documented pain, documented behavioral consequences, and documented long-term physical harm for the convenience of the animal's owner. Nationally, veterinarians overwhelmingly oppose cat declawing, with the majority supporting a prohibition on cat declawing when it is not medically necessary. In other words, most vets already agreed the ban was right. The CVMA was not speaking for the majority of its own members. It was speaking for the financial interests of the minority who still performed the procedure and charged for it. A single declawing surgery costs between $200 and $500. Multiply that by the number of cats declawed annually in California. The math of why a professional association might spend $1 million lobbying to keep a procedure legal is not complicated. Assemblymember Alex Lee has 2 cats. Their names are Yudan and Soba. He introduced AB 867 in February 2025, the 6th attempt in 7 years to ban cat declawing in California. He had watched 5 previous bills die in the same way. He knew what he was up against. 5 different measures to ban declawing surgery had died in the legislature since 2018 due to resistance from the influential California Veterinary Medical Association. This time, the sponsors behind the bill were formidable. The Paw Project, the organization founded by veterinarian Dr. Jennifer Conrad, which had led the campaign in West Hollywood in 2003, and had spent more than 2 decades building a scientific and legal case against the Animal Legal Defense Fund, Humane World for Animals, the Humane Veterinary Medical Alliance, a coalition of animal welfare organizations that had been preparing for this moment for years. Lee stood before the Assembly Business and Professions Committee and described the procedure in terms that left no room for the softened language the industry had relied on for decades. Cat declawing is a serious surgery, he said, with a cat's final toe joint being removed, or its tendons being severed. He was not describing a manicure. He was describing an amputation, and he used that word on the record, in committee, where it had to be reported and could not be quietly buried. The bill moved through committee, through the Assembly, through the Senate, with the CVMA opposing it at every stage, and with the weight of international scientific consensus, the majority of California veterinarians, and the overwhelming support of the public pushing back. On October 9, 2025, Governor Gavin Newsom signed it. Under the law, veterinary professionals who perform any of these procedures for any reason other than a medical purpose may face fines or have their license or registration suspended or revoked. The bill took effect on January 1, 2026. California became the 7th state to ban cat declaw. The other states with prohibitions in place are New York, Maryland, Virginia, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. The District of Columbia bans the procedure, as do the cities of Austin, Texas, Denver, Madison, Wisconsin, Pittsburgh, and Allentown, Pennsylvania, and St. Louis. Here is what happens now. If you live in California and your cat scratches your furniture, you have options that do not involve surgery. Nail trimming done regularly prevents most scratching damage. Soft claw caps, small vinyl covers that fit over each claw and last 4 to 6 weeks, are widely available. Inexpensive and effective. Scratching posts and boards, placed strategically, redirect scratching behavior. Behavioral training, in many cases, addresses the underlying cause. These alternatives work. They have always worked. The reason declawing remained widespread in the United States long after it was banned in most of the developed world was not that there were no alternatives. It was that declawing was easier, that vets charged for it, and that no one had passed a law yet requiring anyone to try the alternatives first. For cats who have already been declawed, the millions of them living in American homes right now, the ban changes nothing about their situation. What it changes is what happens to the next generation. The cats being born right now, being adopted from shelters right now, going home with families who might otherwise have asked the vet about declawing at their first appointment. Those cats will keep their claws. They will keep the last bone of each toe. They will walk the way cats are built to walk. And their owners will deal with scratched furniture the way the rest of the developed world has always dealt with scratched furniture, with a nail trimmer and a scratching post. But this story is about more than cats and claws, and it is worth saying clearly what else it is about. It is about an industry spending $1 million in 7 years to protect a practice that the majority of its own members opposed, that the international scientific consensus had rejected, that 30+ countries had already banned, that caused documented, measurable, irreversible harm to animals that could not consent to it and could not report the pain it caused them. And it nearly worked. 5 bills died in a state that is frequently described as the most progressive in the country, with overwhelming public support, with scientific consensus on one side, with most vets on one side, and a professional association with a lobbying budget on the other. That is not a story about cats. That is a story about how policy gets made and unmade. In a country where the loudest voice in the room is frequently the one with the most money, not the most evidence. The California Veterinary Medical Association did not win this time. 7 years of lobbying, $1 million spent, 5 bills killed. And on October 9th, Governor Newsom signed AB 8067 anyway. Dr. Jennifer Conrad, the veterinarian who founded the PAW Project and spent 22 years building toward this moment, who helped pass the West Hollywood ban in 2003, who had watched 4 more California bills die since then, who kept coming back, said after the signing, "The PAW Project is thankful that California lawmakers have chosen to prohibit elective a procedure that has been proven to harm cats, and that provides no benefits to humans. No benefits to cats. Only harm to cats. Only revenue for the vets who performed it. That is what $1 million in lobbying spent 7 years defending. There are states left. The United States has 50 of them, and 43 still allow cat to. The fight is not over. It has just moved. The same coalition that finally passed AB 867 in California has already indicated it will take the campaign to other states. The momentum that builds when the largest state in the country passes a law tends to accelerate the conversation everywhere else. And from January 1st, 2026 onward, in California, the answer for every new cat going home with a new family will be different than it was the day before. That is what 7 years of trying finally achieved. Not a dramatic revelation, not a war with tanks or a famine or a flood. Just a law signed by a governor that says, you do not get to amputate 10 healthy toe joints from an animal that cannot consent for the sake of your furniture. California said it first. In a city of 35,000 people, in 2003, it took 22 years to say it for the whole state. And somewhere in California right now, a cat is sharpening its claws on a couch. Legally. If this story surprised you, if you did not know that declawing meant amputation, or that it took 7 years and $1 million in lobbying to ban it in the most progressive state in America, share this video, because the animals who are harmed by the things we call routine cannot share it themselves. They cannot vote, they cannot testify, they cannot hire lobbyists. They can only live with the consequences of the decisions humans make about them. What do you think? Should cat declawing be banned nationwide? Is the professional autonomy argument ever valid when the procedure causes harm and has no medical benefit? Tell us in the comments and subscribe, because every week the true stories are stranger, more important, and more worth knowing than anything you will find by accident.